Hello, everyone. Mary Ferris with Fairy God Boss here with Claudia Chan. We are going to give everyone a few minutes to log on and get situated before we get started. Would love to hear where everyone is tuning in from. If you feel comfortable, drop it in the chat. We can see where everyone's from. I am broadcasting live from my kitchen table in Brooklyn. Oh, we have someone from Wisconsin. Nice. I bet it's really nice there this time of year. Connecticut, Chicago, Pennsylvania. Ooh, Toronto, LA. Another NYCer, Connecticut, Minneapolis. Awesome. Well, it's great to have so many of you with us today for this important conversation about bringing your whole life into your leadership and finding work-life balance that works for you, and that's really integrating your whole life, which is something I really love about the gospel that Claudia preaches. And so without further ado, let's get started. As I mentioned, my name's Mary. I am with Fairy God Boss, and we are joined today with Claudia Chan. Claudia is a recognized author, leadership and culture change expert, and entrepreneur dedicated to activating individuals and organizations to accelerate diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace and world. She is also the CEO of She Global, a coalition content convening platform that helps over 100 companies unlock a diverse and inclusive workforce to transform both its culture and its communities. She's the founder of the award-winning leadership conference, She Summit, that has made advancing women and workplace inclusion both accessible and actionable. So needless to say, Claudia is not busy at all with all of her many projects. So Claudia, do you want to say any welcoming remarks and we can dive right into the conversation?
Yeah, just thank you so much for having me. It's just such a delight to share space with all of you for the next hour and the incredible Fairy God Boss community of women. Just really excited and honored to have the conversation.
Yeah, we are thrilled to have you. And you've had a pretty tremendous career writing your book, launching She Global and She Summit. Can you tell us a little bit about your work today and the story that led you here?
Yeah, so I born and raised in New York City, daughter to a very type A tiger mom. My parents came here to America, like typical immigrant story for the American dream, and with very little, but ended up opening Chinese restaurants and just really saw them work so hard and just knew from a very young age I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And my mom said to me, to own your independence, own your business. And, just right out of high school and college, and I actually went to all-girls schools. I went to an all-girls school in Manhattan, and then Seven Sisters College, Smith College, very non-intentionally. It just sort of happened, like being around the community of women and strong women was just like almost my destiny. And pretty soon created a company. I'm 45. I just celebrated my 20th year anniversary of being an entrepreneur. So 25 to 45 years old.
That's awesome.
Crazy to think about it. And so the first company was Shecky's, which it was the era of the 2000s in Sex and the City. We did shopping parties around the world. That led me to then realizing and learning the state of women and girls in the world and women's entertainment to women's empowerment. And really today, the intention originally around She Global and She Summit was empowering women, right? Helping them realize their highest potential, but also be champions for women's issues, lead change for issues they cared about. But really today we've evolved into a leadership organization, really focusing on advancing she, he, and equity. That's what the She today stands for, she, he, and equity for all. So really inspiring all people, women, men, all people to lead change for all people. To me, diversity, equity, inclusion is really just humanity. It's just a better world, a better society. And, it's a leadership company now. And through now, we've had 8 years of conferences, entering our 9th year, writing my book. I've created my whole, a whole methodology of what I call whole life leadership that we'll talk about. And, just really the mission is really just to unleash the extraordinary potential and leader that is inside of every person.
I love that. And so let's dive right into it. I love the whole life leadership philosophy that you've coined. So can you tell us a little bit about it and why you feel it's so relevant today, especially?
Sure. So what I realized in doing, I've had over 600 speakers on the She Summit stage over the years, and also have curated and designed hundreds of content sessions. And in the process of doing so, I was always very whole life integrated, right? Yes, I would talk about, breaking barriers and, all the different movements, whether it's pay equity, getting to parity and leadership, to diversity, inclusion, and flexibility and caregiving. And right, there's all these different topics, but I always gravitated also towards the personal topics, because what it takes. I think leadership, the traditional definition of leadership, has always been very, very siloed and one-dimensional. Typically, when you think leader, you think, oh, this is about like getting a big title at a company, or like owning a business, or it's about just this exclusivity, not inclusivity, right? And it very much pertains to the workplace and leading productivity, leading a team. And I realized that we're never going to get to equity and true equality and diversity and true inclusion is not going to be possible without a whole life approach to leadership, because really leadership should mean, it should mean creating whole, like, success for someone in every aspect of their life. So, and I realized that the way that I was doing it all these years was I had to treat my whole life as the organization that you are leading. So whole life leadership is a new paradigm of leadership. It's a leadership framework that is really rooted in aligning one's career and whole life around what I call whole life purpose, inclusion, and well-being. It's really aligning your career and your whole life strategy with purpose, inclusion, and well-being. And to really teach people, women, men, all people, that we need to really look at all the life departments that make up our life and really treat that as the organization that we should be and learning to lead.
I love that. And I think it's such an important lesson too, in knowing your priorities and what's important to you, and also going with the ebb and flow of your life and knowing that certain things are going to be more important at certain times and maybe take a back seat every now and then. So I think it's a great approach of finding your personal balance and understanding that it's different for everyone. And I love what you said, that a lot of people associate leadership with titles or rank, and that's not always necessarily true. And I think that's important, especially for women, to realize that, it's okay if you're happy being an individual contributor versus a manager, or if you're happy being a manager and don't want to be an individual contributor. All of those things are totally fine, but you need to do what's best for you and your life.
So I wanted to add too that, as we're all just sort of, like, this is such a crazy time that we're living in. It's such an uncertain time. It's such a just unpredictable time. There's a health crisis. There's an economic crisis. There is a cultural crisis around race and all these different topics. And so, this is such a great time, for, I think, everybody, as opposed to sort of, like, there's the external barriers, right? But we need to build that internal foundation of your leadership. Like, if you're strong and you really take the time right now to do that personal growth and personal leadership development work to really define, okay, like, what matters the most for me right now in my life? And what is my, I call it whole life purpose. What's your purpose in your personal realm? What's your purpose in your external realm? You're giving back external realm, right? Like, who are you serving? And so on a personal level, okay, it's family, it's health, it's your financial well-being, it's, like your mental health, all those things, right? And then on an external realm, but like, these are the issues I care about and these are the issues I stand for. Like, this is the perfect time to really, is really to create and define your whole life strategy, right? Because like you're never gonna, like any strategic plan, you have to be clear on your goals. And and your schedule is less about what you get done and more about who you become. And again, it's more about who we become, and having clarity of that whole life purpose is really key. And so, a lot of what I do in my whole life leadership training and course is teach people on how to really define what that is and lead with clarity in that purpose.
Yeah. No, that's great. And I think I love the idea of having a whole life strategy. So if someone is like, hey, this sounds like a great idea, I need to do this, where would you recommend folks start? Like just in terms of evaluating their goals and direction they want to be going?
Yeah, sure. So I I'll just quickly go ahead and share some of the slides that just casually share just more about the How We Rise program. And this is a lot, as you mentioned, I founded the She Summit conference, and I'll share at the end of the conversation how we're updating, transforming that into a conference membership this year. But the How We Rise methodology is really this sort of, there's 4 steps and then there's 8 steps, but it starts with really embracing and embodying a new definition of leadership, right? We've been indoctrinated with what does success look like and mean. Historically, leadership was really designed for men in many ways, and it was designed for like a child-rearing domestic female spouse and like a child-rearing male partner, right? Like that's what our history structures, businesses, workplaces were really designed for men. And so not all people, and especially people of color and other underrepresented groups. So the first module is really about embracing a new definition of leadership. And then we start with, I talk about, like destination, like what's the goal? If you can't see the bullseye, you're never going to hit the bullseye. So whole life purpose is really the second module of, like getting clarity on that. And then the third module is really looking at your career. And I know Fairy Godboss is a platform for women and building their careers and looking for jobs. And your career can be your greatest vehicle for impact, right? And for some people, your career is being a full-time parent. And like like these days, there's not one set thing. Like we can evolve and ebb and flow in our rise in our career. But then we all have barriers, and barriers are, especially the higher our goals are, the more we want to rise, there's always going to be external barriers. And just as I mentioned, like COVID-19, the recession, like Black Lives Matter, like there's always going to be external challenges. But again, if you can figure out, what your manage your inner thoughts, because you become the sum of what you think about. Like you will become the sum total of what your thoughts are. So there's this is like the personal growth module where we really dig into like naming and transforming those core limiting thoughts that are always in the way. And usually they come from something, right? They come from your childhood or an experience you've had. But then we need like next level courage, which is what I call the engine. And then I move into community, which is the fuel, because your community can turn your mission into movements. And then we move into thriving as, okay, it's not just about your business and your career, it's making sure all your life departments are successful. So if you are single, I know many single young women who literally postpone dating and are at a point in their lives, that they're struggling to find a partner in life because they literally left it, or maybe you're really, really focused on your career and like your kids, your family, your marriage is falling apart, right? So there's, again, we've been taught this traditional definition of leadership where it hasn't been an integrated approach. And then the last part of the module of the program is really to then build that strategic plan, is a 3-year vision exercise. And and this is just sort of like, just a diagram of like your whole life mountain. What I call is like, I use the analogy of look at your life as a life mountain. And if this is like, let's just say I'm 44 years old, I just turned 45. But if I get to live to 80, that's only 35 years left that I have of my life, right? To actually, like, what matters is the future. And so I'm here, again, for to have clarity on whole life purpose is so big. And then at the same time, the reason why I say inclusion is also how do we lead also with like, as inclusive people, is because that's about, purpose is about what you impact and what you're aiming for, but inclusion is about how you show up. It's about, your character and your behaviors and how you communicate, how you listen. I think that, we can't, the chaos and the reality of our world right now, like, is really an output of what is in our inner worlds, right? Like, what is happening in society is really an output of what's happening in us. Like, people make up and create our society. So, showing up, how do we actually also check how we show up and what we want to stand for? And then really making sure that as we rise up this whole life mountain, that, again, our whole person being is thriving. So I know that's a lot, but I'm just, this message is so important for this community.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think knowing what type of impact you want to have, and almost not to talk about legacy, but like, what do you want to leave behind? And do you want to see the world, better at the end of your lifetime than it was at the beginning, which I think most people do. Just want to remind everyone that if you have questions for Claudia, feel free to drop them in the Q&A or in the chat. We want to keep this an open and casual conversation. So while you all think of your questions, just wanted to ask Claudia, did you have an aha moment or a light bulb moment that kind of led you to want to change careers and really devote yourself to empowering women and men, for that matter, because you work with a lot of male allies as well?
Yeah, there's been so many, actually I'll say there's probably been 2 or 3 pivotal moments and like milestones. And I was going to say that even for the community, like in your life, and I talk a lot about trying to look at your life from an outside-in perspective, like even just right now with that mountain, because we tend to think inside out, like we're focused on what am I getting done today, and the anxiety or like the to-do list of today and this week, versus we lose sight of like just stepping out. And if you were like your greatest fan, or like you were God, or you were somebody looking at you, oh, there's 7.8 billion people on the planet and there's Claudia Chan, you're just, you have your own unique, like all of us have our own unique purpose and just journey, right? And destiny. And on this planet. And so I would just say that in your life, you're going to have a few milestone changing moments that are almost going to set your life on a new trajectory towards this whole other direction that you would have never imagined. For me, it was probably the biggest one was becoming a Christian, actually. So I, again, born and raised in New York, Manhattan, and like my parents talked about God and believed in God, but they were never religious, right? But so I always just grew up with this like general sense of God. And then I met my husband, I guess like 12 years ago, and he's from Atlanta, Georgia, went to Auburn, Alabama, and just was a Southern boy. And, he met him in New York City. He started taking me to church. And, it was at a time when I was, just transitioning. I was still running Shecky's Girls Night Out, the women's entertainment company, but I was really unhappy. I was at a place in my life where I felt like I had a lot of material success, but no purpose, like no clarity on like the bigger meaning of my life. And I was also not like, my business partnership became pretty toxic at the time. And I was just a kid, I ran that company 25 to 35 years old. I grew up running that company. And so I didn't like character and mission and purpose. And I just didn't really have a big sense of that too, because also in my Chinese family growing up, it was all about survival, right? Because they had struggled through like wars and famines and in China. And so again, like back to like even this cultural moment that we're living in, like we all have different cultural backgrounds. And there's a lot of like ancestral and generational trauma. There's a lot of generational like stuff and gook that, there's the good stuff that make up who we are, but there's also a lot of baggage, right? That's very, very subconscious. And so anyway, So I was just a kid really. And when I met John, he started taking me to church, and and I didn't grow up with like religion forced down my neck. So I didn't have this like extreme atheist, perception that I feel like so many people do, because religion has changed so much in this country. But anyway, so like the pastor just really spoke to me, and I realized that I needed to not just live my life in the world, but lead my life for the world and lead my life for something bigger. And that really, every single one of us is here to not just receive and take, like we live our life, we're 30s, 40s, 50s, and it's not just about experiencing life and receiving, and it's about receiving, and growing, but then to give back, right? To contribute. And so that's really what propelled me into really shifting the business into this whole leadership company, really to unleash that change agent and that purpose, again, purpose-driven, inclusive, whole life leader inside of people.
Wow, such a powerful story. Thank you so much for sharing that with all of us. So you've obviously been a very successful entrepreneur and started at a young age. What advice do you have to women who are wanting to take that risk and start their own thing, regardless of what age they're at, and might be a little too timid to try it?
Yeah, so I just posted a bunch of like shared lessons on my Instagram page, and because I just celebrated my 20th, this 2020 is my 20th year anniversary of being an entrepreneur. And some of those were, number one, see the invisible, do the impossible. Build to aim to put a dent in the universe, like vision really big. And because the bigger vision you have, the bigger steps you take, but you can take them again, but it's every, micro actions at a time, right? But at least you're taking bigger steps because you have a bigger vision. Another one is that there's going to be so many people in your life. And again, this applies to entrepreneurs, intrapreneurs. If you're inside an organization, I like, so much of my work is with corporate America, because that's where I feel like we need the most work, in terms of really this, again, needing this new corporate America needs a new generation of leaders. And if anything, I really encourage people to stay in and change corporate America, because the good ones keep on leaving and starting their own business, and we need to actually change the corporate workplace, and which is obviously on its way. But that there's going to be so many people along the way that are going to tell you things about yourself. They're going to give you their opinions. They're going to give you their advice or their perspectives. And, one of the greatest leadership skills is your power of discernment, and really like knowing what to keep and what to let go of, and what not to let penetrate you. Right. Because it is like your greatest battle in your life is actually going to be the battlefield in your mind. So mastering your thoughts and understanding, again, this is personal growth work and the internal leadership development that we all need. Because if you can actually focus on that and understand, okay, these are my typical, patterns that are not healthy for me. And if you can actually really spend the work identifying what those things are and then coming up with tools. So really, again, and a lot of the great things, like some of the greatest things that, like the tools that I've used for my leadership and whole life success have been words, right? It's been quotes. It's been things that I've read. It's been mentorship. So like even this conversation, maybe there's 3 tools, maybe there's 3 quotes that you hold on to as weapons for that internal battlefield, right? That's ahead of you. So again, like your potential is so limitless. It's about how you manage that. And the last thing that I'll say, and I have so many more, which is, growing your career and what you think success is going to mean, or growing your business. It's actually the journey of life and that work is actually less about what you build and more about who you become as you build it. It's about how it grows you and the person it shapes you into. And really, I've learned that, true wealth and true success is actually well-being. It's actually well-being, and it's peace, and it's the ability to actually impact and influence a lot of change, but doing it in a way where you can actually enjoy every day and have peace and well-being every day. And that, to me, that is whole life leadership. And that is not taught in the traditional, forums out there.
Yeah, no, I think that's such a great reminder to all of us. And I love what you were saying earlier about you can have all of this material success and still feel unfulfilled and unhappy. And so I think finding those things that are going to give you that balance and that well-being is so important, because I've always felt if you have all of that success and you're miserable, what's the point,
And there's so many people that reach that level. Like some of the most successful people I know that have the biggest titles and and have big bank accounts, right? It's like they oftentimes have the least amount of joy and happiness.
So let's switch gears a little bit to some audience questions. So I think this is a great one from Allison. What advice do you have for young professionals who are in the beginning stages of a leadership role?
I would say that, back to what I said earlier about just the internal confidence and the internal clarity is really big to really work on that. So for example, if you're 22 years old and you already know, to start journaling, okay, what are my self-esteem? What are my core limiting thoughts? What are the things that I say to myself that's negative, that puts myself down, and start just documenting that immediately. And just knowing that those are probably going to be in your next rise or your next season of life or professional life, those are probably going to be your biggest culprits. Biggest barriers. I think the second thing is really just thinking about, what do I want to impact and lead change for? What and who do I want to impact and really support and help? Just given everything in the world and be specific, right? For example, if you are African American and you feel passionate about pay equity or something like that, or you are a designer and you want to support XYZ community, who and what do you want to impact? And then what are your skill sets? Are you really good at writing? Do you want to be a writer, an author, a journalist? Are you a marketing? Are you a creative? What are those natural born professional skills and gifts that God gave you, right? That you're just sort of good at. And then in your heart and your instinct, right? When you're so confused, I don't really know, I'm good at a lot of things. Or, I think it's like your gut will always tell you, what it is, at least what to make a decision on, right now. Just listen to your gut. But it is start with who and what you want to impact. So that's the purpose, right? That's the body of people that we're here to impact. And then it's and what vocational skills, what type of career do I want to pursue to then make that impact? And obviously you might not find anything that's specifically perfectly in that scenario, but as long as you come close to it, right? Then be open and then have the flexibility, and just trust your gut. The universe, God is always casting vision on you. Don't neglect your visions and your gut feelings. I think that we're also not taught that. And that's where your discernment muscle is going to grow. So those are just some of the tools at a young age, right there, you're leading change from where you are. You're leading from where you are. And that's the thing too, is you can be a leader, at any age.
That's so true. So we've touched a little bit on this, but, we are all living through a very unprecedented time with social movements, a global pandemic, more people are working from home, just very, very uncertain right now. So what advice do you have for women especially who are kind of struggling with that balance, right? Maybe they are working moms who are now having to devote some of their time to schooling. How can they bring whole life leadership into this very rocky time we find ourselves in?
Sure. So I'm actually going to just pull up and give all of you a tool to use in this process. Let's see here. So, and this is in my program, in the How We Rise leadership program, but this is just an example of a whole life wheel. right? And one of the steps that I say is, the first thing is it's a great time to assess, like, what are the life departments that make up my life? And I always say your mental health is your number one life department. And when I say mental health, it's just your well-being, right? It is, like, and everybody has mental health, just like you have people have physical health. We have all kinds of health. Like there's too much stigma around the word mental health. Like it's what we, it's what we're thinking about. It's, this is also just another viewpoint, which is an org chart, right? And I would say like my mental, physical, spiritual health is my number one, but then, like my marriage is really important. My kids, I'm a mom of a 3 and 5 year old, my career, and which is also my social impact, being a team leader, right? There's just my community. There's different things that, just start taking inventory of what, your life departments are. And then one tool that this is in my book, This Is How We Rise. Because when you even start like assessing like 1 through 10, where like, okay, what is the quality of my romantic life? Maybe I've been single for like 5 years and like I haven't put any priority towards that. Maybe my finances are a mess because of XYZ. I've been focused too much on, on something else. So, is that you could start sort of assessing again, like the whole life strategy of what, how you're doing in different things and what you really want, like what do you really like, what matters the most? And, the goal of life is not to have it all. It's just to have what matters. And what matters also changes in different phases of your life. So that is one thing, but then you can feel really overwhelmed by all these things that you have to lead. And so in the book, I talk about elevation periods. And so like, this is just an example of, July through October when I was pregnant with my son. Oh, no, actually I was pregnant. My son was just born. And, my dad was in the hospital. He was, it was actually the summer that he passed away. And I had my conference coming up, so maybe in that season of life, like being a mom, like the conference and being there for my dad were the only 3 things that were my priority. Like, so if I had a quarterly strategic plan, right? It's like, those are like, that was my elevation period, right? Or, before when I was pregnant with my daughter, and my manuscript for my book was due literally like the day after I had my scheduled C-section. And I just scheduled it because I was like, there's no way that, and I already had a C-section the first time. So I was like, just, I had to assess everything and I made the decision. But, it just like at that point, it was, certain things, maybe my marriage, maybe it was my health, my specific physical health and making sure I was eating well, right? Because I was literally in like prenatal period. So you're going to have different seasons of life where you make certain departments a priority. So right now, literally, maybe you can only just think about July and August. That's all you can think about. Right. And it's like these A, B, and C are my priorities. And that is it. Maybe you just need to maybe you're just, you need to give yourself a little vacation. And if you can financially just give yourself a little bit of space and use this time to recharge, because come September, you're going to be slammed, like just, again, think about those life departments that matter and health and your self-care being number one. And, plan your life and your rise and elevation periods. Also, worrying about the future is really the most pointless thing that there is to do, because worrying actually does nothing but like if you think about climbing up your mountain or like just walking up your mountain in your journey towards your whole life purpose, the more you worry and the more you have those like internal barriers, it's like walking up the mountain with bags of rocks on your shoulder. It doesn't help your hike. Right. So it's just reframing around just seeing this period as an innovation period for your life from the outside in perspective. Again, I look at like, look at my life at what happened at 25 years old, what happened at 30 years old, what happened at 40 years old, right? It's like, God, going to church just changed my life, or meeting that person just changed my life, or getting that job just changed my life. Finding that resource on Fairy God Boss changed my life. And so again, like step out of your life right now and just try to bring that perspective to it. So to minimize the anxiety. And really, if you're actually always trying to be in certainty, then you're always trying to be in control. And if you're always trying to be in control, then your dreams are probably too small.
And that's such great advice. And I love what you're saying about worrying, because I am a worrier by nature. But I think one of the lessons I've learned with this pandemic is you have to take each day as it comes. And to your point, worrying is not going to help anything. And times are so uncertain right now. So we just kind of have to wait and see what happens, which for warriors is often a struggle.
And that's another great tool I'll share is what matters is today. Like what matters the most is today. So, like tomorrow has you'll have plenty of time to worry about tomorrow when tomorrow comes. Just like what needs to get done today, right? And I think that, again, but when you do have clarity of your whole life purpose and you do have a vision and like it's in your subconscious of what matters, then you're actually making decisions today. And like I always say, like the top three, like what are the top three things that you could just get done today? And don't carry the weight of tomorrow or yesterday. It's literally pointless and it's just going to weigh you down. It's going to impact your quality of work and your quality of success and well-being today. So.
Yep. Yes, I love that. So we have a few audience questions that I want to turn to. So Maria says, first, thank you so much for great advice. What role does being a decisive person play in one's success? And what are some suggestions to develop strong decision making?
You cut out for 1 second. Can you repeat that question?
Yeah. So she's asking, what role does being a decisive person play in one's success? And what are some suggestions to develop strong decision making?
Yeah. So the power of decision is really critical because it is in the power of decision where action happens. And but it can be challenging. It can be challenging sometimes. Like for example, right now, what I thought would be like a 2-3 week process has turned into like almost a 2-month process of us revamping She Summit, because we're going to be announcing our conference membership very soon. And it's been a creative process, right? And yet there's always going to be moments in your life where you want something to happen now. You want to have clarity on it now. And you want to just make that decision now. And decisions are critical and they are important, but you've also got to respect that sometimes, if it's not coming to you immediately, you also have to trust and have faith that there's a reason for that. And that's a good point to really ask yourself, like, what is this uncertainty made up of? Like, why is it that I'm having a hard time deciding, and define what that uncertainty means and what's holding you back from that decision. And then like, okay, it's okay then that I can't decide at this moment. It's okay. And like, this is going to take more time. And so for me, part of me has wanted to just make a decision and go on this product launch. But then the other part of me is, there's something in my gut, right? And like Black Lives Matter happened. And there's also other things that have happened over this period of time that actually gave me clearer vision. And I realize now that, now all the decision-making is happening, right? So you have to just sort of trust your instinct. Know that the power of decision is really critical, but at the same time, do it in partnership with the universe, do it in partnership with God, do it in partnership with faith or your instincts, right? And you have to just trust yourself. And no matter what, we can do more the universe can do more in your surrender than it can do in your control. And so at the end of the day, your identity and your worth is not going to be tied up in like some product launch or getting some title at a job or some company. Your identity and your worth is going to come from within, and just knowing that you are extraordinary. If you didn't do anything right now for the rest of your life, your birthright is extraordinary, And so the thing is that like, once we're more at peace with that, then it's also going to be easier for us to ebb and flow in decision-making.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic advice. And I love what you're saying. If you're having trouble making a decision, diagnose as to why, know that it's okay maybe not to decide right then and there, because then to your point, external forces could come in and it makes it so much clearer as to why that decision wasn't made. And I love as an individual when you can see those aha moments, you're like, oh, this this has a huge impact. I'm so glad I didn't decide a month ago, 2 months ago, whatever it is. We are getting close to time. So if you have any other questions for Claudia, please chime in so we can try and get to as many as we can.
I see also a question here from Lalitha. Is 45 years of age too late to think about becoming an entrepreneur? And you're from India. That's so cool. Hi to India. So I just wanted to answer that is, I think her name is Ellen Latham, or I believe that's her name. She's the founder of Orange Theory. She started her business, I believe, Orange Theory, I believe, like at 54 years old or something crazy. And it has gone on to become one of the largest, biggest brands and, you know, just franchises out there. And her whole story is that I think she was a fitness instructor or like a spa manager. Mm-hmm. And at 40 years old, you know, or something, she got laid off. And basically, but she had a workout regimen and philosophy that she just started teaching, and people started loving it. And eventually she got it trademarked, and then built her first, and then launched Orange Theory in her 50s. And it's just become, in the last 10 years, it's just exploded in growth. And so there's no too late to do anything. And you know again, it's the worrying, it's the doubt that actually will prevent you from starting and creating and prevent that success. So really anything is possible with, again, purpose, faith, confidence, and all of those leadership tools.
Yeah, I love that. And I totally agree. I don't think it's ever too late to do anything. If you have a dream, you should go for it.
And there's also ways to balance too, right? You can also be, I call it a hybridpreneur, you know, where you're also like, you know, maybe you still need to consult with a few clients, right? Today, having a career there's no one faceted career anymore. You know, people have, you know, corporate people have side hustles. I think that, you know, many of them dream about starting their own consulting company or starting their own companies. And I think that, you know, entrepreneurs also dream about, you know, having those really secure corporate clients or corporate work. So, you know, if anything, and I think that as you work in the corporate workplace, it's just interesting to know that, and hopefully eventually create a culture where you allow people to actually have those side hustles, you know? So.
Yeah, I love that. And you bring up a good point. So if you do work in corporate America at a big company and you realize there needs to be change within the culture, how do you recommend, as an individual contributor or manager, how do you go about making that change?
In terms of like when you see something that's not right with culture?
Yeah.
I mean, this is the time where, you know, courage is, you know, this is where we really need courage right now. And as we look at all that's happening, you know, obviously we're having the Me Too movement for racism right now, and where, you know, the world has just been shooken up, and, you know, the crescendo of events, right? Like if you think about the women's movement, it built up, and like Me Too, times up, it exploded. And now we're having that with race around Black Lives Matter and George Floyd, and what that was sort of like the icing on the cake, right? And so what we're seeing out there now is, how are we, you know, like what's the work that we all have to do? Like, how do we solve this problem? Like, we all have to do the work. We all have to do the personal reflection work. And part of that is like, how do I want to show up? Like, this is the inclusive part, the inclusive leadership part. How do I show up and learn to become an ally? Because ally is an action and a verb. It's not a noun. And how do I actually develop the courage to actually, when I see something that is not right, I don't care if you're an assistant and you're in your first year or whatever level you are, but if I see something that is not right, that I have the courage to speak up about it. Or if I see something that is a reflection on me, or that, you know what, like maybe I do have a racist thought, maybe I do have a bias around this, and I need to, having the courage to actually have the humility to realize what you need to work on, your lack of knowledge or ignorance, right? Like that's another level of courage that we all need to have. So, but I think that that's where, you know, is just really like, just devour learning, you know, and like organizations like Fairy God Boss, organizations like She Summit, doing training courses and learning and podcasts, and, you know, be intentional about who you want to learn from, and, you know, and take maniacal notes, because those notes are going to be your tools, and then just use those tools to build your leadership. And then that way, when you're in your day job, you know, whether you're making a decision for your business, for your product, for your service, whether you're making a decision, you know, as an employee, for, you know, in marketing and sales, you know, you have conviction over what you believe in. And right now, organizations have to embrace that. It's
Yeah.
the bottom up and the top down collaboration that is going to accelerate us forward. So we need the voices bottom up just as much as we do need top down.
Yeah, I think that's really valuable advice. And I think your point of like, just never stop learning, you know, I think sometimes we think, oh, I'm done with school, there's nothing else to learn. But I think we can always constantly be educating ourselves. So we are almost out of time. So I want to close with one question. I think, you know, in this time of uncertainty, a lot of negative things are being discussed, and we don't see a lot of the positive. So I'm going to put you on the spot. What do you think is one positive thing that can come out of the time we find ourselves in?
I think the most positive thing right now is for you to get clarity of what matters the most in your life. And, you know, and what I like, your whole life purpose, right? Like, what matters the most in my personal realm, what matters the most in my societal external realm. And really take the time now to look at this period of, you know, like, the world is being, you know, humanity is being reset right now. 2020 has just been an insane year. And I mean, we're just watching, I mean, just the volume of lives that we've lost, right, is really puts life into perspective. And so really using this period as, you know, as really thinking about what matters the most and how you want to align your life and your decisions, every aspect of your life, you know, with what matters the most. And seeing this period as innovation for something beautiful and something magical and something just what's truly going to give you well-being and truly going to give you purpose and meaning in life. And so this is a really, you know, use this time, you know, as an innovation period. And like, that is the most valuable lesson and thing that I could just share with everyone on this call. And the last thing, when we're talking about education, is that, you know, great leaders are great learners. So keep on learning and working on yourself.
Love that. Well, Claudia, I could literally keep talking to you for hours. I just find you so inspirational and motivational. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with me and the Fairy God Boss community. We will be sending out a recording of this conversation via email to everyone who registered, as well as information on how you can connect with Claudia and She Global. So thank you all again for joining us, and thank you so much, Claudia.
Such a privilege. And yeah, I was going to say that thank you for sharing how everybody can connect with me.
Yeah, so, absolutely. Okay. Well, everyone, enjoy the rest of your Thursday.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.